Cars in 3D. And I thought, well, this one was not made in 3D. It came out in 2006, a few years before 3D returned to the theaters. So I thought it would be fun to compare the original to the updated 3D version, which came out many years later, in 2013. And I noticed they made several little touch-ups and corrections for the 3D version. So let's see if you can spot them as they come along. Notice the lights in the background. I'm guessing they just used a random generator for those spots, and when they re-rendered it, it just put them in a different place. Because there are several spots where you do see anything that's deep in the background and random are just slightly different in the 3D version. Now here, even the left and right eye is a different color on the far right of the screen. This is very peculiar. And I guess that creates a bit of a twinkle effect. I wonder if that was intentional or if that was a mistake. But for now, not all of these are going to have differences. Some of them are remarkably close to the original to be, well, really indistinguishable. Although I do notice they buffed up the paint quite a bit. They made them a bit more of a cherry red here. Now, the stereo here is really, it's good, if not spectacular. I think one of the reasons is the characters usually fill up most of the foreground, and there's not a lot crowding them in. So there's a lot of the details are in the background. Here's an exception, and this looks fantastic in stereo. But in most scenes, you kind of get this detail hanging out in the background where you can't make much of an impression. It seemed to me almost like a step backwards for Pixar when I saw the advertisements for it, because CGI always seemed to do well at doing things like metal and rock in the early days of CGI, and the challenge was always going towards more organic things. So this seemed to be a movie, well, it's about cars, and cars and CGI tended to get along very well, so it didn't really seem like they would be challenging themselves. But this was actually the first Pixar film to use accurate ray tracing. That's the computer code that tracks light bouncing around, because they really wanted the metal and paint to look as real as possible here. Ray tracing, though realistic, takes a lot longer to render. So long home graphics cards only recently started to offer the process for high-end gaming. Trade-off in looks for speed just didn't work for video games, and frankly the cheats were really good. Now, I haven't seen Cars before, or any of the series, so I decided I'm going to watch them in the order that they were made. And one thing that surprised me about part two, just to jump ahead, is that they begin by killing off this car, the Doc, who's kind of the mentor here. But that had no role in the plot of part two. They just open it up, boom, this guy's dead, have a nice day. And it was like, what? And I later discovered, okay, that was Paul Newman's last performance, being the voice of that car. So I guess they just wanted to find a way to put in a little tribute. Coincidentally, I recently watched Newman's last live-action role in a miniseries called Empire, or Empire Falls, which is actually about small-town life. He plays a frizzled old scoundrel father. His performance is good. The series itself is a bit uneven. Now check out the middle of this. See how in the 3D version that got expanded up. Isn't that interesting how they decided to enlarge that? And also here, see how they get rid of all those English signs. I guess 3D versions were made for the international market, and they just made one 3D for the world and left it at that. That is one thing I've noticed when I've gotten into watching 3D movies over the past couple of years, is you always get the international version. It's rare that you'll find a 3D movie that is a North American version. It's interesting to see them clean up kind of these little tiny defects that pop up once in a while. And also slight manipulation of shadows. Check out underneath the car here. And you kind of wonder what the if that helped pop it out, or if that was just the rendering settings just weren't exact match of what they were originally. It is interesting that the negative for this exists as a computer code that they can take and just kind of repurpose for future use. They can always make it at a higher resolution or play with it. It's a really interesting way to hold on to a film. Although in this movie, not everything is kind of rendered out in CG space. They did make backgrounds as mats. So a lot of those hills and skies in the far background, those were actually made flat. And I wonder if, at least in part, if a lot of this is actually converted 3D. Because you do notice how many of these shots do have that push in of the side of the screen that if this was fully a rendered 3D version, you wouldn't see why that would be necessary to manipulate the screen like that. But if the distant background shots are actually flat matte paintings filling up a lot of the area back there, then it kind of makes sense that they would maybe they're only rendering the foreground in stereo, and the background they're doing some kind of conversion process on. I don't know, but I suspect that's what's going on here. Pixar and Disney seem to do family well, and maybe that's fading a bit, but their classics all seem to have one thing in common. It shows characters discovering the value of family. Most adventure films deliver from a teenage point of view, someone determined to do it all on their own. And if there's a problem, it's something interfering with that singular vision. Here, it takes that attitude as just a starting point and transforms it. Doing well is measured by who you have to do it for. Wow, this is by far the most dramatic change that I've noticed between the original and the 3D version. I wonder why. Well, I like this one. It had a lot of heart, and I like a movie with heart. All right, next time we'll do part 2.